Hello everyone. Welcome to the course of Automotive Manufacturing Processes and Technology. Myself Vimal Salot from LJ Institute of Engineering and Technology. In this session, we will discuss about four topics from the welding chapter. That is soldering, brazing, braze welding and different types of the welding defects. So let us start with soldering process. Soldering is the process which is used to join two similar or dissimilar metals with the help of filler metal. The melting point of filler metal is less than 450 degree Celsius. The equipment which is used for this process is known as soldering iron, which is shown here. So it is a soldering iron, and when it is given power supply, the tip of this soldering iron gets heated. Now the filler metal which is used is generally an alloy of lead and tin, and it is in the wire form. So wire reel is shown here. So these are the basic necessity to perform this type of the process. The filler metal which is used is an alloy of tin and lead, and the flux which is used is generally zinc chloride or aluminum chloride or resin can be used as a flux material. The function of the flux is to prevent the formation of the oxide or to prevent the welding zone from the contamination from the atmospheric air. Generally, this type of process is used for the connection of electrical circuits and electronics circuit boards. So it is shown here. It is the most common application of soldering process. So when we want to perform soldering process, first this soldering iron is heated, and at the tip of this soldering iron this filler metal is supplied, and as it has a lower melting point temperature, that is below 450 degree Celsius, it will get melted, and by capillary action it is deposited between the two parts which we want to join together. Next process is brazing process. It is the process in which we are using filler metal, but this filler metal is having the melting point temperature above 450 degree Celsius. Brazing can also be used to join two similar or dissimilar metals. So in this diagram, two components are shown, that is, it is first component, it is second component. So these are the two components which can be made from the similar metal, or it can be made from the dissimilar metal also, but we want to join these two components. So it is basic setup for the brazing process. Welding torch is necessary to perform the operation, as we are using filler metal, and generally used filler metal is copper and its alloys. Sometimes silver and its alloys are also used. So it is a welding torch, and now we know that there are three types of the welding flames. Oxyacetylene flames are available, that is carburizing flame, oxidizing flame and neutral flame. But for this kind of application, carburizing flame is used, in which the proportion of acetylene is more as compared to oxygen. So this filler metal is get heated, it will be melted with the help of this welding torch, and it is deposited around the joint which we want to join. The flux which are used commonly are borax or boric acid in the powder form. Next type is braze welding. It is also known as bronze welding, as we are using bronze filler metal in this particular application. So comparatively it gives more strength of the joint. Another difference is that the filler material is not deposited by capillary action, but filler rod is heated and it is melted and directly it is deposited at the welding zone at we were doing in the case of the welding process. Now let's see what is the common procedure for soldering or brazing or braze welding. Braze welding is similar to the brazing, but the main difference is that here we are using bronze filler metal. Now first step is pre-cleaning. Before performing the process, it is necessary to clean the surfaces which we want to join, as surfaces may contain dust or dirt particles, or sometimes it may also contain some traces of grease or paint. So it is very necessary to make the surface clean before performing the process. Next step in the process is fluxing. So now we have to apply the flux, and the main function of flux is to prevent the contamination of the welding zone and to prevent the formation of the metal oxide at the welding zone. That is the main function of the flux. So flux is applied. Then next step in the process is heating. In case of soldering iron is used, and in case of brazing and braze welding we are using the welding torch for the heating purpose. Now let's see the comparison or difference between soldering and brazing process. So first point is, in case of soldering process, the filler metal temperature is below 450 degree Celsius, but in case of brazing, the filler metal temperature is above 450 degree Celsius. Next point is, in case of soldering, we are using tin and lead alloy for the filler purpose as a filler material, but in case of brazing, copper and its alloys and sometimes silver and its alloys are used for the joining purpose. They are used as a filler metal. Next point is the flux which we are using in case of soldering process, that is resin or chloride of zinc and aluminum, and in case of brazing we can use borax or boric acid in the powder form as a flux. Now the soldering process produces comparatively less strength of the joint, but brazing has comparatively stronger joint as compared to soldering process. Soldering is used in electronic circuit board connections, whereas brazing can be used in case of automobile radiators, containers, fuel tanks and pipe fittings, and it can also be used in a heat exchanger. Next topic is different types of welding defects. First defect is weld crack. It is most undesirable welding defect. Now there are two types. First is hot crack. If crystallization temperature or melting temperature of base metal is above 10,000 degrees Celsius, then during crystallization hot crack may take place. Another type is cold crack. After cooling of the welding process, where temperature is very low, during cooling also crack may take place. Crack may appear on the surface of the weld pool. It may also be present inside the weld pool, or it may also be present in the heat affected zone. The most common reason is residual stresses. If they are present in parent or base metal, then there are chances for the crack may take place. Another reason is ductility of the base material. If ductility is not proper, then also crack may occur. Next defect is known as the undercut. In this type of defect, the base metal is get melted away from the welding zone and it forms a notch like groove as shown here. So it is known as the undercut. If selection of electrode is not done properly, then it may result in undercut. If voltage is much higher than necessity, then also it may result in undercut. Next type of defect is known as spatter. If molten metal particles are present on the surface near about the welding zone, and they will get solidified and they will stuck to the surface of the base metal, then they are known as the spatter. Next defect is porosity. When welding process we are doing, there are chances of the gas bubble entrapping. If there are any gas bubbles get entrapped in welding zone, then it will result in porosity, because when gas releases from the gas bubbles, it will leave some porosity. So this type of defect will result in reduced strength of the joint. Next type of defect is overlap. In this type of defect, the welding material is get deposited beyond the welding zone as shown here. So it is getting overlapping with the base metal beyond the welding toe. Next type of defect is slag inclusion. As we know that we are using flux with the application of welding. So the function of the flux is to prevent the welding zone from the contamination. So when it reacts with the oxygen or some impurities, it may result in a slag, and if it is not removed properly, then it may remain present in welding zone. So this type of defect is known as slag inclusion. Next type of defect is incomplete fusion. As shown here, if welding material is not deposited properly in welding zone, then it will result in a gap between the welding pool and base material as shown here. So this type of defect is known as incomplete fusion. Next type of defect is incomplete penetration. So generally this type of defect occurs in case of butt welding. If deposited metal is not in proper amount, or if welding is not done properly by the welder, it may result in incomplete penetration. If welding current is also not set properly, then also it will result in incomplete penetration. So these are the different types of the welding defects which are commonly we can see in welding application. Now the main difference between welding and the other techniques, that is soldering, brazing or braze welding, is that in case of welding we are hitting the base metal up to its melting point or up to plastic stage. So higher temperature is involved. It results in some changes in the internal properties or changes in the internal structure of the base metal. But in case of soldering, brazing or braze welding, we are using filler metal, and the melting point temperature of filler metal is below the melting point temperature of the base metal. So it will not affect the properties of the base metal. Another point is that soldering, brazing or braze welding can be effectively used to join two dissimilar metals also. So we discussed soldering, brazing, braze welding, what is the procedure, then comparison between soldering and brazing, and what are the different types of the welding defects. Thanks for watching.